Our topic is a very interesting topic for today. Tap, swipe, virtual, the next chapter in card innovation. I think, cards have seen a great change in the industry. India recently crossed 100 billion in terms of 100 million in terms of cards. And primarily, a lot of it was on the back of innovation. Things like swiping your card, tapping your card through various TP apps. I think that has led to a lot of Gen Z and millennials using the card. And, so with that, I think let's start this topic and understand from the various ecosystem players. So I would want to start with you, Arvind. You come from a bank, you come from an issuer. And what's your view on how virtual and contactless have changed the face of the credit card industry?
Okay, so a virtual card and a contactless, there are two different product. Virtual card, obviously, it's primarily it's getting used for solving B2B payments, but at the same time, it's a very secure in the environment which we are living in. A kind of frauds are happening in the industry, especially on the digital payment. It's very important to have the product which create a security for the corporate payments, or even at that matter individual payments, which was not there on the main cards which we all used to carry, especially on the corporate side. And this was a big threat, and it was corporate always used to hesitate when they go and talk to the bank and say, oh, look, I'm looking for a corporate card solution for my organization, but at the same time I want security or I want all risk to be mitigated. So far, and that risk no one was willing to take. So when this virtual card has come, this changed the entire ecosystem, and this changed the corporate payment entire payable receivable solution which corporate has built. Because today this is so secure, it's a single use card. It's a you can restrict this with the merchant MID level restriction, MCC level restriction. This is driving a huge growth in the corporate payments, and as well as now it's moving into the retail. Definitely on the consumer side also adoption will come, and this will have a fantastic future in terms of increasing the card spend, because today a lot of us are hesitating when we are going and spending money, especially with the new payment gateway, new merchants abroad, whenever we are doing cross-border payments. So all this fear will go away when consumer will start adopting this kind of product, and this is going to happen soon, because now it's there in B2B. Soon networks and FinTech like Falcon and Zaggle, they are working closely with the banks, and definitely they will bring those changes for consumer as well.
No, thank you so much. I think what you're saying is absolutely
and on
right.
Contactless, tap to pay, like this was launched by network 2015, 16. This was launched, and now the growth is tremendous, and every year up to 300 to 400% growth is coming on that side because of the convenience. It's very convenience now. The total spend which we are doing, 8 to 10% is happening on tap to pay. And this is changing, and this we always say this to everybody. This is the only solution which is direct, giving competition to UPI payment, because here still it's a hassle-free transaction, and it's going very smoothly for all small value transactions with the merchants.
So that's great. So one thing I think from what you said, Arvind, what we realize is that this innovation can only happen if we reimagine the merchant acquiring infrastructure. So Sachin, my next question is to you, because ISG is a large player in the merchant acquiring space. So what's your view, and how has ISG imagined the entire merchant acquiring infrastructure to support this card innovation?
So the way we look at it, so there are a couple of points there. So if I have to think about innovation and the way we think about innovation, so one side is that we definitely should not forget about the robustness side of things, right? So no matter how many new things we bring in, if whatever it is not robust enough, that does become a challenge for any sort of scale. So the one thing that we have seen, and we have seen this across the industry, when it comes from a back-end processing perspective, your reconciliation settlement sides are still extremely complex, and which always needs solving for. So that is something that we have a key core focus on. That is one side. The second side, of course, is the creativity around how we use the entire acquiring ecosystem. So one of the use cases that we are working with is, of course, on the MPOC side, where you have your tap and pay on your COTS device. But one of the other use cases that we have just gone live with as well, which is just an interesting way of using the acquiring ecosystem, is on the NCMC side. So where the entire service area creation and all of those aspects that are there from an NCMC perspective, the wallet creation, etc., can now be done on a COTS device as well. So which is now you're moving an acquiring solution to the consumer side. So that it just depends on how one ends up using these technologies in these ecosystems, and we have just gone live with that as well. Yeah.
That's brilliant. Yes, I think that's brilliant because until the acquiring infrastructure goes, we can't really do card innovation, right? And on the acquiring side, we've seen so many innovations which, before the cards went live, the tap and pay was already. Sorry. So I think, even before the card companies could innovate, I think the acquiring companies had already brought in sound boxes. They had brought in MPOS devices, like you said. So it's great to see these kind of innovations. Quick one for you, Pranjal. Zaggle has been the largest expense management card distribution player in the country. So how do you see the adoption of TAP, virtual cards? How do you see the adoption in this entire space?
So I think I'll pick from what both Arvind and you said, right? And I'll cover both commercial and consumer side of things. From commercial end use standpoint, and I think COVID was one black swan event in everyone's life, right? Which changed how the outlook is towards payments, towards security, towards being able to do contactless payments, where there is less interaction, less touch involved, right? And because of those events, the way they transpired, we see businesses and individuals both more accepting of contactless payments, tap and pay, those kind of innovations, right? Digitization. And one of the surveys I was reading says that 90% of people who are wanting to do digital transactions prefer making contactless payments, right? And that's a very powerful data. And obviously, COVID was one event, but there is a lot of innovation happening, a lot of regulator push, a lot of will from the government to be able to, bring the infra, make it more efficient, more secure, ring fencing the consumer interests, right? So step-up authentication when you're doing it on a device, or even contactless with PIN is now allowed. We see a lot of evolving trends even on expense management side, where, like I think Arvind was also touching upon, commercial cards, when people are carrying those physical cards, there is also a need to possibly latch on to a RuPay network and also open up UPI on commercial cards. Right? That is something which is a need of the hour, and obviously regulator, NPCI are all evolving towards it. Banks are also adopting certain risk measures to ensure that commercial cards being used on a UPI rail kind of opens up new avenues where a customer can transact. From Zaggle's standpoint, what it means is, if my expense management solution has all the workflows, company's policy configurations, we give out a card which works seamlessly across all payment modes. And that data feed flows into my expense management software. And consumers don't need to scuttle between multiple fragmented payment modes. Some payments made through cash, some payments made through card. Everything happens under one card plastic, data feeds come in, and the approval process is very seamless.
Wow.
Right? So those kind of innovations or enhancements in customer experience journey is what we are able to see. Another thing that comes to my mind is, from a consumer standpoint, it is very critical that we make the transaction journey very invisible to them. When I say invisible, it has to be frictionless, right? So tap and pay enables that. All of us are used to pulling out our phone and doing UPI transactions. Now with UPI interoperability, we are now seeing prepaid card also, government, RBI has mandated recently that, bring UPI on PPI. We are talking about credit line on UPI also, UPI on credit card. This is a very good example of how one innovation is actually cutting across different payment modes at a mega scale, right? So that's a very good innovation to see.
No, absolutely. I think it's a lot of things that we do in our everyday lives that actually drive innovation. So somebody was actually telling me that tap and pay started emerging as a innovation on credit cards after metros came in various cities in India, because people started saying, if I can tap for my commute, why can't I tap for my payment? So, I think a lot of innovation will be driven by what we do in our everyday lives as well. So you're right, and that's what is driving the industry. Sajan, over to you, and we want to understand the Nepal landscape, and not just the trekking and the Everest landscape, what your colleague mentioned earlier, but also the landscape in terms of how Nepal and South Asia in general is imagining the innovation for tap and pay, contactless, virtual cards.
Thank you for the question. So let me build a bit of a context before I answer your question directly. So Nepal, if you see, we're 30 million people. Over 70% of our population is age of 30 and younger. So that has given a lot of digital adoption over the last 20 years. Because of that, and combined with COVID, like the black swan that you mentioned, that propelled the growth of digital transactions over the last 5 years, increasingly so. So based on that, what we've seen is payment mode has been QR-based largely, but since COVID happened, a lot of banks and innovators in the fintech industry have explored other mediums as well. And now we are at the intersection where we're slowly transitioning from QR-based transactions to more card-based. Banks have started to onboard tap and pay solutions, NFC-enabled virtualizations of card tokenization. And not only that, as a country level, there's an entity called NCHL, which is equivalent of NPCI in India. They have been chartered to develop a local card scheme called Nepal Pay. When that comes, that will be very similar to the RuPay of India. When that comes about in the next 6 months or so, that will allow for a lot of the domestic transactions to be routed locally. So as from that vantage point, we see a lot of innovation coming in, a lot of strategic and infrastructure level realignment happening from government and banks. And then that will allow for smaller fintech companies like the ones I lead to ride on that built infrastructure and build innovative products, mainly around digital lending, seamless integration of remittance, which is one of the big sectors for Nepal, and micro-level payments to small SMEs and such.
Oh, that's really interesting. I think with the way you're talking, I think Nepal will soon be where India is today in terms of innovating. So a quick question to you, Sachin. The Gen Z is not going to stop by just a tap and pay contactless innovation. So as Falcon, we keep getting requests for wallets, SDKs, better UI UX. I think all the banks we work with are talking of that, right? What's your view on that, coming from a payments play? Can you talk about innovation in terms of UI UX, which is also happening in the country?
Sure. So again, the way we see it now is that given how UPI has exploded within the country, and given how our payment rails per se are fairly well mature in terms of the scale and the volumes, but there is still a lot of penetration that still needs to be done within the entire country. So the way we see it is that now, since we have all these jigsaw pieces that are there, now putting them together for various use cases is what comes into play, right? So one thing, for example, is that, we don't necessarily need to innovate all the time, but maybe what we need to do is just realign certain assets, right? So one example that comes in is, for example, from as you had said earlier, from a transit perspective. And one of the reasons why, at least we feel that a card will always be something that will be preferred during transit, because there's no time, right? So there's no time to take out a phone, scan a QR code, do all of that sort of stuff. So what's happening now is that, and as we are working further with our banking partners, and as we are seeing further merchants that are there, it is per use case we are seeing various modes in which the user experience can take place. Transit is one example. Of course, with expense management and the way Zaggle does it is another example of how cards can be used in various forms and formats. The other use case that we are seeing that there is some amount of exploration going on while there's still some KYC challenges there is around the education sector, right? And how cards can be used within that ecosystem. But we do know that there are some fintechs who have faced a lot of challenges regarding KYC. But there is a use case there as well. Right? So
do you also see wearables coming in a big way?
Again, it depends on the use case. Wearables is, see, again, somewhere where there is no time, okay, or there's a lack of a device. Okay, that is where we see something like a wearables coming into play. There are a few journeys in life where that can be used potentially, and again, education is one example of such. Transit is another great example of such, where you want to quickly move through things. Other than that, it can be a fashion choice. So I don't know if that's there, but that can be a big market in itself, right? And the way that gets marketed is slightly different. We're all wearing smartwatches, so
absolutely.
So
yeah.
there is a possibility there as well. Yeah.
Great. So next question to you, Arvind. While there is so much talk about innovation on the consumer side, and we see so many hoardings, advertisements, 74% of India's payments are still commercial payments. So do you think commercial cards are the neglected child as far as innovation is concerned, or do you think that there is no way you can innovate on commercial cards? Or what's your view on that?
So definitely there's a lot of way to innovate, and if you see in last 12, 13, 14 years, all the innovation has happened in the B2C side, which is on consumer. And on the corporate side, there was no much of focus till 22, I mean, you can say pre-COVID. Post that, a lot of companies have started doing innovation. And primarily, why that has not happened? Because, see here, on a consumer side, most of things are driven basis what kind of value proposition we are bringing for the individuals, what kind of offering we are bringing to the customer. On a B2B side, it's completely different. Not all the corporates is only coming to you only for getting some benefit in some in terms of monitoring benefit. A lot of things has to be process driven. A lot of things has to be customized corporate wise. So it's a lot of challenges which FinTech has to go through in terms of innovation. And so far, since everything was happening on a consumer side, a lot of innovation has happened on that. But now what we have seen in off late, a lot of FinTechs has start coming into this space and started innovating things which, like Pranjal talked about the expense management tool. See, in our country today, you go to any large corporate, today most of them are working on reimbursement making to their employee account. There are a lot of things which can be digitized, which was not there, but now that is happening because the company like Zaggle or a Falcon is giving the end-to-end integration to the corporate, giving all sort of ideas that how you can streamline your payable, receivable, how your vendor can pay, early using the card platform or a FinTech platform. And acceptance is coming because today, like Sachin talked about acceptance side, acceptance on a B2B side was not there. Everybody was talking about consumer going and partnering with B2C or a e-com site and doing the integration and doing individual consumer transaction. But now on a B2B side, that approach has started coming in from the fintechs, from the banks, where even a merchant started believing that if I am coming on the card platform, this can be one of the way to get early payment from my corporates. Why I am going and paying interest on a bill discounting or a supply chain finance kind of product. So imagine, and that thought has started coming into corporates as well as the bank because of the fintech. What you guys are doing, going in the market and talking about this innovative product. And you can see that change, and my personal belief is in next 2 years, you may see commercial business crossing consumer.
No, that's great. I think we all need to see a lot of improvement in the commercial and corporate business because, I personally also feel that a lot of innovation happens for each one of us. But when as a corporate, we go and try to make payments, we are still doing the old RTGS, NEFT, and, the standard thing. So I think still a lot of room for innovation.
Yeah. So if you see in the country today, we are sitting on, if you can go and check this information on RBI data, 1,30,000 crore is the total exposure given to the corporate. Out of that, penetration is only 65,000 crore. And that is monthly kind of transaction which is happening. 65 lakh crore, sorry. You see now we have almost digitized consumer side of payment, including UPI, and we just at 20 lakh crore. If you see the corporate side of RTGS, NEFT payment, that itself is 35 to 40 lakh crore in a month. So the huge room and a kind of innovation is happening. Definitely this all will move on to the card.
That's really great. That's really great. So Pranjal, next question to you. And, we've been talking offline also on these things. That do you see an interoperability innovation, what a lot of people have been talking about, that let the customer choose his own instrument, right? So an interoperability between a wallet, between UPI and cards.
Yeah.
So do you see that happening, since you guys deal with a lot of distribution?
Definitely, and there is an increasing demand for it in the market as well. And let me put a bit of elaboration around what we are incubating as an idea internally at Zaggle. We have worked on a module which what we are calling is BROM. It stands for Branch Recurring Operating Monthly Expenditure, right? And I'll tell you the genesis of this kind of a solution that we are working on. With the quick commerce catching up, right, in India especially, and also business is expanding. India is a good growth story. There are a lot of expansions in the business where now not only a centralized payment solution is the need of the hour, there is a lot of decentralization that is coming up. When you talk about quick commerce, we talk about dark stores, etc. We see the need to give empowerment to the second level of the layer, and a central accounts payable team cannot manage end to end, right? So there has to be a hierarchy created where there is a central control, visibility, transparency, both to the finance team and to the central leadership team. But a level of enablement happening at a L2 level where a store manager is given empowerment with guardrails, right? So those kind of things, and an ability to cater to the need. So take an example of a store outlet, right? And without taking the name of the client, any retail store outlet, for example, the need for the store manager is to have a monthly budget to be able to use that across the entire ecosystem where he or she might be making P2P transactions also, P2M transactions also, right? It will be, so a utility bill can easily latch on to a BBPS, work seamlessly across NEFT, RTGS, cards, because it is accepted. But what if a chai wala walks into the store, says, I'm not a formal merchant, give me my payment. Do we bring it on a cash exchange, or we enable the same payment using a card rail, but through a UPI transaction mode, right?
Wow.
So those kind of use cases we see increasingly growing as a need. Then on top of it, you build a software layer that, you give the branch manager a certain limit, let them manage their budget within that limit, but carve out subcategories. For a P2P transaction, you get this supplement. For a P2M transaction across, say, a meal, a fuel, those kind of innovations is what we see, and there the interoperability plays out beautifully.
So that's great. That's great. So to you, Sajan, two questions. So first is, how do you see India and South Asia emerging as the powerhouses, for innovation, not just on cards, but across various instruments? And secondly, you manage FinTech alliances. So how important are FinTechs for these innovations? Do you think banks can do this innovation without FinTechs?
Okay, I'll tackle the first question. The innovation in the region, I think the main new topic that we're going to enter into is the central bank digital currency. So every nation state in the region is doing their part of the study. Some of them are further ahead than others. But I think in the course of next 5 years, CBDCs are going to be basically the basic payment modes in most of the countries. For Nepal specifically, where I see innovation in payments is in the remittance sector, because as I mentioned before, Nepal, 30% of Nepal's GDP is equivalent to the amount of money that we get from remittance. But all of the money that comes in is for a purpose, like to pay a school fee or to pay for a rent or something like that. So there will come a time when these remittances will directly be converted into payments rather than just sending money. So imagine somebody working in Saudi Arabia and sending money home, not just sending it to a savings account or a current account, but actually splitting that remittance into a purpose-driven payments. So when that happens, I think that's going to revolutionize how Nepalese payment space is going to be, evolving. Now, the second part about FinTech alliances in the region. So in Nepal, currently in FinTech Alliance Nepal, we have about 27 members. And consciously, we have banks as members as well. And FinTech Alliance Nepal is also a member of the Asia FinTech Alliance. That is a larger umbrella body that currently the chairperson is from Taiwan. So it has countries like Taiwan, Vietnam, Singapore, etc. So because of FinTechs, it has allowed banks to take on new innovative products and solutions to their customers. Obviously, there are challenges and unique DNA required to run a FinTech company that a traditional bank, I don't think, should try to enter that space. And there's a happy, there's a trade-off and there's a happy medium where the bank's role ends and a FinTech's role starts. What I tell in Nepal and when I speak to bankers is we need to define within the bank what is the right amount of digital transformation that is to be done directly by the banking staffs. So does it make sense for a bank to employ, let's say, 1,000 software developers? Or is it a case where bank would maintain a small pool of engineers to maintain their mobile banking application and the bread and butter of digital part, and then partner with qualified and competitive FinTech companies, not just from a country, but regionally, if not globally. And finding that balance from the bank's vantage point is very important because I've seen banks try to do everything themselves and fail at it. And so I think that is where the collaboration is going to be required. I was impressed, by the way, today in the afternoon I had a meeting with the CEO of IDFC Bank here in Mumbai, and I was very impressed. He was going through the numbers, and I think the numbers, as I added it up, it accounted to almost like 1,300 people that he has directly into technology. So for a bank of that size in India, maybe that's the right number. But some of the banks that I have dealt with in Nepal, that's the total number of staffs. So having like 1,300 people, 1,300 engineers is going to be too much for a country like Nepal. So I think every bank, based on their DNA, based on their market size, market cap, all of that, need to decide what that balance should be of how many engineers you want to have inside and what kind of FinTech partners you want to onboard.
That's very interesting. So I have in the interest of time, the last question, and, each of you can pick it up or any of you can pick it up. We've spoken about innovation. We've spoken that innovation is necessary. We have spoken that fintechs bring innovation along with banks. We've also spoken of how commercial payments need to get more innovation. But with innovation also comes fraud, right? And there could also be security lapses when you innovate too fast. So other than educating, which we keep doing, we keep seeing advertisements from NPC and others, what's your take on how do we maintain security and lower frauds while innovating?
So I think again technology can play a big role here, and we covered virtual card solution and restricting payment flows online. I think, and on top of that, we'll have to keep those AI-based solution for consumer card as well or consumer payment as well, which probably like we are using for our corporate card customers, where uh, giving all the rights to the corporate, enabling their, all the features on the platform, rather than calling banks and saying, okay, now I don't want to travel. I'm not traveling abroad. My card needs to be blocked. Or at times you want to keep it card for certain MCC level only because my usage are going to on that side. So these technology, innovation on the technology, and again, fintechs, tech companies is going to play a big role on that side as well, because the way fraud is increasing, obviously. I mean, and in this scenario, I mean, banks or a risk team of any organization is thinking, okay, this kind of fraud will happen, and the fraudster is thinking a next level that, okay, now let's leave this, let's do something else. So obviously technology has to play a big role, and as and when this keep evolving using AI, we have to keep building the a platform and a solutioning on top of whatever payment infrastructure bank and fintechs are building.
I'll also take a stab at it. I think it's a trinity of consumer education, regulatory compliance, and self-governance, right? If these three play out well, then we lead a very trust-based adoption to digital payments, right? If consumer trust gets derailed somewhere, the adoption will simply not come. If we go hyper on regulatory compliance, we stifle the innovation cycle, right? And self-governance, because being a part of this ecosystem, all of us have obligation and responsibility to build robust solutions which are scalable and which protect consumer interest at the forefront, right? So this trinity is what needs to play out well, and it's moving in the right direction.
That's well said.
Right, and sorry. As a fintech company, we always believe in the duet of fin and tech, right? It has to be a melody. It should not be a cacophony, right? So that way, I think with partner banks like IndusInd and a few others, we always assume the roles and responsibilities how regulator is foreseeing it, right? And we try to embellish it with our level of compliance and self-governance. That's how we approach the entire problem.
So I think just adding further to some of the market headwinds that are going on, that is also because of how technology has evolved, right? So one of the key part in the self-governance side, which has now also become a compliance piece as well, is around the data privacy piece. Right? So a lot of frauds are happening because data is leaked, right? And data is all over the place. I think one of the key elements, and this is where, see, data privacy as a compliance is one side, but how you implement data privacy is going to become critical. At least the way we see it within the organization, and what we would love to do, and this is a long journey in itself, is instead of just doing it as a compliance conversation and just doing it as a tick box, which we are seeing in the market already a few guys have done that, but actually do it with the intent of what the regulation wants to do, which is around, firstly, consumer transparency, but at the same time, the way the data is managed at the back end. Right? The data shouldn't be flowing all across. Tokenization is something that from a card perspective has gone through, but now it is a serious conversation around all PII, all personally identifiable information. I think that's something as an entire ecosystem we'll need to come together and figure the challenge out. Doing tokenization for PII is the ultimate aim or goal, but this is a long way and a lot of work that needs to be done around that.
True. Anything from you?
Sure. I think that, fundamentally, really nothing has changed, because from a bank's perspective, prudent risk management has always been there, and it's part of the existence of taking public's funds, right? So now the scope of that risk management just got broader, and with that we have a lot of tools and technology and innovation in our disposal, right? So I'm not as worried. It's just like traditionally when you ran a bank with one head office or like 2 branches versus now you have 2,000 branches, the probability of getting theft just went up by 2,000 times. Now that just replicated in the digital space, and how is it any different, right? So, but now we have the tools with AI. We have, fraud detecting softwares there. We just have to be one step ahead of, the thieves, so to say. So I don't think it's as big of a deal. It creates opportunities for fintech companies to come up with more and more innovative products. The core of running a banking institute and doing prudent risk management remains the same. The shift probably will happen from traditional just managing risk from a loan concentration, deposit concentration, etc., KYCs. Now the shift will probably have to be in infrastructure, data, like he mentioned. So that scope probably got broader, but I don't think it's anything to really get worried about.
That's great. I think all of you in your conversation, whether consciously or subconsciously, mentioned AI. So I understand that AI is going to play a big role in terms of making sure frauds don't happen. I think that's it from for this panel. I think we'll obviously can keep discussing more, and anybody from the audience who has any questions can please yeah.
Yeah, hi, I'll be very quick. You talk about fraud, right? So recently MasterCard came out with a payment passkey services where the biometric facial recognition is also taken as authentication. So what's the future in India? Do you think it will get acceptance? Biometric recognition instead of OTP or something?
So the way, at least now at a broad level, it depends on the use case, right? So from an acquiring perspective, with Aadhaar enabled systems, etc., there is already use cases where you can do authentication based on biometric or even facial recognition, right? So there are already use cases from an authentication standpoint. Now, if you want to use that for payments, there are other countries who have are already doing this today. So depending on how well it is marketed and of course having the robust fraud prevention systems at the back end, I'm sure that at some point in time there can be use cases, especially in queue busting scenarios. So for example, if you've got long lines at a great example is DigiYatra, the way DigiYatra functions, right? So there are use cases already in India today which are gaining a lot of traction. Right?
Smile page doing well.
Yeah.
One last question to Sajan. Pretty delighted and also surprised to know that you're launching Nepal Pay. For a country of your size, I was trying to understand, is there a need or a use case? Or is it we trying to do something built for future pretty early in the game?
Very good question. I wish I was personally building it, but I think I get that point. As a country, we're building it. So Nepal Pay, the main reason that we went out to build Nepal Pay is for very similar reasons why RuPay and China UPI, etc. were built. If you ever come to Nepal, before Nepal Pay scheme, for a Nepali consumer like myself, I have the love for momos. If I take my local Nepali bank issued card and go to a momo station and buy a momo and pay it using that card, we are having to pay a rupee or 2 rupees out of that 100 rupee plate momo to New York, to our friends in Visa. So that had always been like a sore thing within the regulators and within the larger business community in Nepal as well. And was that a problem that we could solve before? Not really, but now with the availability of technology and the orientation of the regulators in setting up the infrastructure, and thanks largely to India for setting that benchmark in the region, we were able to establish similar entities like NPCI here, called NCHL. So one of the things that they were tasked by the central bank was to, let's create our own local card scheme so that person like myself doing local trade, we don't have to pay the fees to Visa. So the RuPay, similar to RuPay, Nepal Pay will also be using Discover Payment Technologies backend. So for any Nepalese traveling outside of Nepal, they can still use Nepal Pay card, but that'll be routed through Discover. And for any tourist that they will come to Nepal using a card issued outside of Nepal, obviously we'll have to pay for international partners like Visa, MasterCard. We'll happily do that. But I think the idea was to create that local scheme to avoid paying unnecessary fees to Visa and outside parties, I think. I don't know how else to say that. Wasn't that the purpose of RuPay? Yeah, of course. But yeah.
Well, thank you so much, everyone. Would you like to say something, like a closing? Do you want to say something? Well, thank you once again, everyone, for this insightful session. And we would love to appreciate and acknowledge your presence here with presenting a memento, requesting Vikrant sir to kindly come up and present the memento to each one of them. Thank you once again, Sajan sir, Pranjal ma'am, Arvind sir, Sachin sir, thank you. It has been a very, very interesting session. Thank you once again.